Hello, thank you for joining me. I am going to explore the idea of differentiation between those areas that we talked about a week ago. So, if you remember, the pelvis rotates over the femurs, over the legs. The legs can move around the pelvis. During coordinated motion, these two things happen together. And the ribs rotate around the pelvis as well. So all of these things happen to disperse load up throughout the system. To illustrate this, we're going to start with a very simple idea of lying down on your back. And I want you to feel the weight of your pelvis against the floor. And you can even rock a little bit from side to side to feel where your pelvis is in relation to the ground. Now, if your ribs are lifted off the ground here, it's going to make it more difficult to feel what's happening down below. So, if at all possible, imagine that the back of your rib cage is soft against the ground. You can take an exhale out your nose or your mouth to let that happen. If your hands are on your ribs, if you're unclear on what I mean, inhale through your nose, exhale softly. Use your hands, guide your ribs in towards each other and down towards the floor. And when you do that, again, this mid-back area is going to come a little bit closer to the floor. Once you feel that connection a little bit more clearly, start by taking your feet relatively wide and let your knees roll towards each other. And then let your knees roll away from each other. See what happens in your pelvis naturally when you do this. So this is the thighs, the femurs moving around the pelvis, but there's a pretty decent chance your pelvis is trying to respond a little bit. So if you feel like your pelvis is tipping as your legs do this, see if you can do the same action while keeping your pelvis still. And you might notice that that limits your range of motion a little bit. Again, the body is meant to work in this coordinated way. Now take your feet, so they're about hip distance apart. And imagine you have a tail. You're going to press your tail towards the floor. Your pelvis will roll, your low back will arch. Now take your tail between your knees. Your pelvis will flatten and just go back and forth there. Now, as you do this, see if you feel like your legs are moving. You may feel a little shift in the awareness in your feet. Again, super normal because the body is integrated. But if you can keep your legs relatively still so they're not tipping in or out, that will facilitate the awareness of what it's like to have the pelvis moving around the legs. Take that back to center. Now extend your right leg all the way out and move your left foot to the left a little bit. Take your left hand on your left thigh. You're going to think about initiating this from the pelvis. We're going to do this two ways. So the first way is from the pelvis. You're going to reach the left knee over your toes and let your left pelvis lift up and over to the right. My thigh bone hasn't changed positions. This is staying still. I'm reaching the knee. I'm moving the pelvis around the leg. And I'm initiating the motion from the pelvis. Now, try to press your foot into the floor. So the action will be press the foot straight down into the floor. The knee will reach forward and then the pelvis moves. So now suddenly, and then relax. We're initiating the motion from the foot. Try this just a couple more times. And switch sides. So again, think about moving from your pelvis. Your right front hip bone is going to reach up towards the ceiling and to the left. When you do that, this right knee reaches forward. So those are the coordinated actions. Again, this thigh bone, it's not rolling in or out. I'm moving the pelvis around the leg. Now shift your awareness. Use your right foot to press into the floor. That will send the knee forward and that will lift the pelvis. Take one more. Go ahead and turn over into a hands and knees position. And you're going to keep your knees relatively underneath your hips. Again, we're going to think about this two different ways. The first way I want you to think about it is that you are reaching your pelvis straight back towards your heels, and then you're reaching your pelvis forward. So again, I'm initiating this rocking back situation from my pelvis. I'm moving my pelvis around my legs. Take just one more there. And then shift the awareness. I want you to think about pulling the feet and the knees towards your hands. It's like you're trying to move your legs forward, and that brings your pelvis back. Now push your feet and your knees back towards the wall behind you, and that brings your pelvis forward. So now I'm using my legs to direct the motion through the pelvis. My pelvis is still moving around my legs, but it's going to feel very different. Find center. Pull the toes towards your knees. Lift the knees off the ground. Now move your left knee out to the left, and then move your left knee to the right. So just opening and closing this left leg. Now I'm moving my femur around my pelvis. Switch sides. Make sure you breathe. Coming up into a tall kneeling position. I'm purposely taking this from the floor where you have lots of feedback up higher. I'll face away from you so you can see what's happening here. You're going to start to reach the right knee straight down into the floor. And I want you to imagine that this right side of the pelvis is getting really long away from the ribs. I'm going to shift my weight over to the right. I'm going to let my left knee pick up a little bit. Bring it back to center. Now I'm going to reach my left knee into the floor. I'm going to shift my center of mass over to my left. I'm going to lift my right foot. This is not this, right? This is a different thing. This is my ribs and my spine moving to create the side-to-side action. This is using my leg as a support system to move my pelvis side to side. Find center. Take your right foot forward. And when you get here, you can take your right foot so it's in a comfortable position. It doesn't need to be super narrow. It doesn't need to be super wide. Just see what feels good for you. And then shift your weight a little bit from side to side so that you can get a sense of where your pelvis is in space. Once you have that idea of where your pelvis is in space, think about softening the ribs again and rotating the entire breastbone just a touch to the left. Or excuse me, just a touch to the right. So you're, again, starting to be oriented over this right leg. From here, you're going to lift your right heel off the ground. This is moving my femur relative to my pelvis. Set the heel back down. Lift. Femur is moving, pelvis is staying still. One more. Now, let your pelvis shift forward. And now let your pelvis shift back. We could do this so that the leg stayed still, So I could get the sense that the energy of my pelvis is going forward without moving my leg, or I can integrate it. But either way, this is my pelvis moving my leg forward and back. I could also think about, instead of moving from my right side of my pelvis, I could move from my left side of my pelvis. So I could think that my left pelvis is moving forward and my left pelvis is moving back. My leg is moving too. Again, this is more of that coordinated action, right? But I'm initiating from my pelvis. I could also find center here. And I could just take that imaginary tail and take it between my legs and take it behind me. So suddenly I'm moving my pelvis relative to my legs. My legs aren't responding. Go ahead and switch sides. Play with some of that on the other side. So take your left foot forward. Again, kind of shimmy and shake. Feel where your pelvis is in space. Find center. And then rotate your breastbone just a touch to the left. So my torso is going the direction of my leg. It's not moving away from my front leg. It's going the direction of my front leg. Same principle here. Let's play with the idea of letting this pelvis move forward, the left pelvis move forward, letting it move back. When you do that, the femur moves as well. So everything's coordinating. So does the shin. Shift your awareness. So now the right pelvis is like that's driving. So that's shifting forward and shifting back. So all of these things change sensation and awareness throughout the leg. Find center. Lift your left heel. Left heel lowers down. Again, isolating movement. Femur is rotating around the hip joint. We could also on this side for fun lift the inside of my foot. Femur rotates around the pelvis and lift the outside of the foot. Take one more. Find center. Stand all the way up. Come low. And from this low position, so what I mean by low is I'm just in like a ready position. My knees are bent. My hips are back. You're going to lift your heels up. So notice again, my torso doesn't change position. My femurs move relative to my pelvis. Femurs move down. If my knees start to wander in and out, it's totally fine, but that just means that there's more of this action going on in the femurs, right? Take one more. Now stagger your feet. So I have my right foot forward and my left foot back. I'm going to start with my left heel on the ground. I'm going to do the same action of rotating my breastbone a little bit to the right. So my torso is moving the direction of my right leg. And lift your left heel, lower your left heel down. Again, I'm not moving up and down. So my pelvis is staying still. I'm moving my leg around my pelvis. I'm going to keep my left heel up and I'm going to shift my pelvis, my right pelvis. We'll focus on the right pelvis. So the front leg pelvis. I'm going to shift it back a little bit and shift it forward. Back, forward, back, forward. Now let's focus on the left pelvis. So the back pelvis. That pelvis is going to rotate forward a little bit and then back. And notice how all of this changes your sensation. And go ahead and stand up, shake your legs out. Let's switch sides. So again, ready position here. And this time, let's play with the idea of moving the pelvis around the legs. So shift your pelvis back. I'm not changing position of my back. I'm moving just my pelvis. Shift your pelvis forward. Shift your pelvis back. shift it forward. There's action responding here. I move my pelvis, my legs go. Take one more. Now keep your left knee bent, take your right heel back. And this time, let's start with the right heel lifted. So now lift your left heel, lower your left heel down. This is again the pelvis, or excuse me, the femur moving around the pelvis. My torso, remember, is rotated over the direction of the front foot, the way I want to go if I were moving forward. We could also do something different with our pelvis if we wanted to move it, or excuse me, with my torso if I wanted to move a different direction. Now keep your left heel lifted, just for fun, just to change things, and shift your pelvis back, shift your pelvis forward. Shift it back. My hands are here to make sure I don't move my spine position, meaning flex or extend at my spine, that I'm actually doing it at my pelvis. Now from here, think about this back pelvis moving forward and back. Then stand up, shake that out. And go ahead and come into a seated position. Just a comfortable seated position, whatever that might be. And with this, it's all the same principle. So if I can't find my pelvis in space, and I can't figure out a way to be kind of stacked and even on my sits bones, that's going to affect what I have to do with my ribs. If my ribs are flared up, that's going to disconnect me from my pelvis. If they're really rounded, that too is going to disconnect me from my pelvis. I'm just finding a place where I feel supported. It's like my structure is supporting me rather than me fighting to get my structure to make a shape. Reach your legs all the way out. And you're going to play with this idea of rotating these upper thigh bones. Rotate them to the left and bend your knees. Now, a number of things happened here. My pelvis rotated and my femurs rotated, but I initiated the motion of my femurs. I hope that makes sense. Let's go the other way. My femurs are going to rotate to the right, and you'll notice I take my right hand down. That helps with this, again, this rotation. My torso is rotating the direction I'm trying to send the energy. Back to center, rotate. We'll shift the awareness in just a second. Rotate. Okay, so now let's look at what happens when I move my pelvis. So if I think about rotating my right pelvis to the left, I get the same thing, but it feels very different. And my right pelvis is further away from the floor. Which one's right or wrong? They're both right. My torso also responded a little bit faster. My center of mass is located at the level of the second sacral vertebrae. So whenever I initiate change in my pelvis, that's going to cause a faster rotation, usually through the rest of me, meaning the center part. Take one more, rotating the pelvis. And then go ahead and lie back down. Let your hands be wherever's comfortable, and just feel again this weight of your pelvis against the floor. And also feel the weight of your ribs against the floor. Hopefully, just that little bit that we did started to connect in a more comprehensive way this whole center region and clarify how this area, this upper leg bones, how they work. Just take 4 breaths at your own pace. and come on all the way up. I hope that was as much fun for you as it was for me. And I sincerely hope that clarified some of these ideas that I talked about in the um, Instagram video, like I said, that I posted a week ago. As always, if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out and ask, and have a most wonderful day. Thank you.